They said that we couldn't mess up. So everything that you answer questions for will come up. So Dr. Pariso, and you see her picture up here, she is going to be monitoring everything for me. So if you have any questions and you put them in the YouTube, she'll be able to help you. Here's my thing. Go to slido.com and put in this code that you see up here, the Z841. It'll show up on every slide. You don't have to remember. And you'll be able to participate in some of those questions. And then I've never used Slido before, but I thought we would try it out. There's nothing wrong in a virtual conference trying something new and knowing how well it's going to work. And then when you answer the questions, it'll come up. So this presentation is about engaging readers during distance learning. I live in Middle Tennessee and work for a school system near Nashville and Rutherford County Schools, and I also teach at Trevecca. If you follow me on Twitter, you can ask me questions at any time. If you're watching this as a recording, please chat with me on Twitter or send me a direct message, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, it's not coming up. This slide is supposed to come up with the first question, but it didn't. But the question would be, you know, how comfortable are you during for virtual learning? And so all of us are very nervous, even if we are experts at presenting to others online. When it comes to talking with our students, we're not as comfortable. So that's what the basis of this presentation is how do I take my what I love to do and how do I create a virtual environment for it. So we'll consider digital resources, we'll look at our face-to-face literacy practices. We don't want to stop good teaching and become bad teachers online. We just want to find ways to engage our students in some of the same curriculum. And then hopefully we can figure out what digital sources we're going to use, and we're going to discuss via the chat and Twitter the best digital devices for their students. Here's my normal face-to-face format. This is my classroom. This is where I'm reading and sharing. One of these is my college classroom. One of these is a couple of years ago when I was in the classroom. And my students would gather and discuss and do projects together or talk about literature, all those things. We know we want our students to continue to do this. So now this is our potential setting. And that same college classroom, this is what my social distancing classroom was going to look like. And so my students are not going to be allowed to move. I actually have to divide my students into 2 groups. And so I will be meeting face-to-face with some while some will be online. I have to rethink all of everything. But one of the most important things I don't want to rethink is my student choice and voice. I participate in Project Lit Community, which is on Twitter, but I've always advocated for students to be able to see themselves in their literature that we share, whether it's their choice that they're reading or what I'm teaching in class. And so I don't want that to change. I want that to continue because I want my students to continue to be able to see students that reflect their truths, or where they can learn about other students' truths through what is they're reading. And so something else I don't want to change, and something that really does scare me, is the book access. So I have always had a very, I probably have about 2,000 to 3,000. I probably have less than I used to because I got rid of a lot, but about 2,000 books in my personal library. I would just put them in my room. When it was time for them to choose a book for whatever purpose, they were able to choose. Where have I found the funds over the years? I have probably spent my retirement in books. So there's some things that, you know, I want them to be able to do. So I'm probably, you know, I can't let them have free reign anymore to just pilfer through my books. So, or the classroom's books. So I'm thinking we're going to use plastic bags and some other things. anybody that has any ideas, please share them. And so, you know, please help me out here. So we also want to go to online options. We all know that most of our local public libraries, students can check out books digitally. A lot of times, if you just search the web, really, you can find lots of books and stuff. And then Epic, which was Epic Books and now it's Epic School, is still going to be free to teachers during online hours, at least as far as I can tell. So now, getting them books, making sure we have the right books, those are the things that aren't going to change. What's going to change is how I deliver those books, and then how am I going to teach those books to support reading comprehension. I do text sets, content standards, and reading skills, and this part of what I'm doing is not going to change. What's going to change is how I'm engaging the students with the text and how I'm getting them access to it. So the first thing I always do is I look for some sort of fiction story. Sometimes it's a short story, sometimes it's a novel. I have to promote Ernesto Cisneros' latest book, Ephraim Divided. We read it in ELL Chapbook. It was a great book. I went to Common Lit and found some nonfiction texts that actually have to do with some of the history stuff that we might be studying in our world history class, the Holocaust. There were a couple of those. They are difficult. They would need a lot of help for our students, but still, you know, depending on your level, you could use them. So in the past, I've always started with vocabulary, and how I've done vocabulary is I'm a foldable queen, and I've had the students, the students do vocabulary. So that's not going to change. I'm not going to stop having them do vocabulary. It's just going to be doing it in a different way. I went to a presentation at TESOL, and somebody recommended this Padlet, and using Padlet to create that 4-square kind of brainstorm and other ideas, and then they would have access to this all the time. I created also a Word template where my students could fill out together. We're a Microsoft school, so it can be done together, or they each have their own copy and I help them fill it in, or other students can share their ideas sometimes. If we're completely virtual and my students are not sitting in a classroom with me, some of the sharing may have to be asynchronous. I can't say that word. But if we're all sitting in a classroom together, it could be more synchronous. We don't know what we're going to do yet. For my actually reading of the text face to face, if I'm teaching a class, I can read it, and students, if they're online with me, can watch me. If you go to YouTube, you're going to find a ton of, especially picture books, where people have read them out loud and put it on YouTube. There's some great online resources with celebrities reading. Again, if you search the web, you're going to find audios that are on there. I use those in class. I would just post them for my students to access. For most of our textbooks and Common Lit, there's an immersive reader that students can use. There's a Microsoft Tools and Google have some forms of immersive reader. Microsoft has it embedded in Word, in Forms, and then Office Lens. I highly recommend you try Office Lens. It will help you find some really great things to do with where you can take a picture and you can then put it into Word, and it will then create that immersive reader. If you all have not looked at that, I'm not going to spend time going through that. I'm just kind of giving you resources, but immersive readers are really good. Just remember, the reading is not perfect. We have to know that. We have to know that sometimes it's not as best as we would like it to be. So when the students are reading their text, they can read it into Flipgrid. So you say, okay, you've read a book. You're like, I want you to practice your reading. I did this a lot with poetry. You can do it with poetry. You can do it with text. You use Flipgrid. And if you use that moderation tool to keep students from seeing each other's until you give them permission, then every student would have to post before you release them. However, if you've got a beginner or an intermediate that just really is scared, you can release them all and let that student listen to everyone else's and then say, go listen to your classmates, and then you do recording. You have to decide how that's going to work for you. EduPuzzle, I got this idea from a TESOL participant. Now, I'm not sure about the privacy with EdPuzzle, but you could go in and perhaps think about this differently. But you put in videos in EdPuzzle and then you put in questions. Well, if a student put a video in EdPuzzle, then you could go in and put comments on their video to allow them to see that. My concern with that is privacy, but it's a great idea. We also use PlayPosit, so in our county, so that may be more private. I don't know about those privacy issues, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do this. I just want to figure out a way. But it is a great thought process if we put a video in EdPuzzle of them reading or doing a presentation or something, and then we can give them feedback instead of questions, which is the traditional way to use EdPuzzle. That's not my idea. I stole that idea. I give her credit in the end. So comprehension. We all want to know if our students are paying attention. And Larry Filazzo really talked about this in his keynote. He said we need to get them to interact with us every 10 minutes or so to make sure they're paying attention. Well, Answer Garden is a live Wordle, but you can put a question in there and they still would only put a one-word answer. And it's going to give you, if it's more open-ended, then it'll give you, those larger words for the answers. Goose Chase, which is also another new one, you could make a scavenger hunt in the text where students or teams have to individually find answers or hold up pictures to answers that they're doing. And this really would be best asynchronous, not together, where you give a team, hey guys, your team has to go through and answer all these questions in this time period. Please check out Goose Chase. I made one for to begin the year with, where students are going to have to find different classroom supplies, and whether they're at home or at school, they'll be able to do this. And then Slido, which is really great. I think part of the issue I'm having is the lag time between me presenting in Zoom versus presenting in YouTube. But if you go to this Slido and the Z841, put in that code, then you could answer those questions, and I might take pictures and answer some of those things or post some of those answers on Twitter after our presentation. And then if you're watching this recording, you'll be able to answer anytime you want to. There's an extension for Google Slides. There's not an extension for any sort of Mac PowerPoint, but there's supposed to be a Windows extension for PowerPoint. But I personally only have Mac stuff, and I haven't checked out my computer for the year, so I don't know how that works. So if anybody wants to go on and has Windows and wants to try Slido and embed it in your PowerPoint and tell us how it works, please tweet us out some things. And as soon as I figure this out, I will do that. So creating discussions over text. It's very important that our students discuss. So obviously, if we're live in Zoom, we can do breakout rooms and all those things. I'm not going to go into all that, but we definitely want to do that. And with our English learners, we want it to be small group discussion. So we're definitely going to do breakout rooms. Kidem, which is the platform that we are using in our district for online delivery, will have its own chat feature, and we'll be able to do some of that as well. Of course, Flipgrid can be used in class or later, and really you could make a grid for a small group and only allow that small group to have that one so that they can discuss. Oh, sorry about that. And so you can do live flipping too, which is where you turn the camera around in Flipgrid, and if two students, or even if they're 6 feet apart in a classroom, they could potentially find a 6 feet apart place, maybe go outside your door, go outside in the hall, and be interviewing each other to create a classroom discussion where you can at least hear both their voices. I haven't tried this, but I thought this was a really good idea. Again, you can hold approval until everyone has made their initial response. And then in my resources for this presentation, I give you a link to the Padlet for this Ed Puzzle for feedback, the one I talked about before, and you could do it again. So when we're writing our discussions, obviously Padlet is great. I loved Padlet. For my students that were hesitant to write, they would read each other's responses. They had to write it in their own words. So even if they were summarizing some of their classmates' stuff, it was okay because they weren't quite ready to do that response. You could easily post your frames, whether they're sentence frames or writing frames, on that Padlet, so your students have that frame anyway, or you could let the other students writing be the frame. Because sometimes we don't always want to give frames. We want our students to see what they're going to come up with without our help, especially our more advanced students. Our beginners are going to need all that support. You can respond to others in Padlet. I know in Teams, and I'm going to a training to learn more about this, but I went to a training last spring. You can create a great Padlet discussion so that students can practice writing. There's so much you can do with Padlet. Now, granted, if you want more pads, you have to pay more. There's a really great tool in MS Word called Dictate. And if you use Dictate and your students aren't quite ready to write all of their stuff yet out, they can use the Dictate tool, put it in Word, and then copy and paste that into their Padlet or whatever and clean up the grammar. If they just say it in and we know that and they paste that directly in, then we know that they're at least trying. I loved that Dictate in MS Word to get our students to bridge that gap between what they can say and what they can write. Google has voice type. I'm trying to give more resources than just what we would use in a Microsoft world, but I live in a Microsoft world, so that's where I have to kind of look at those resources. So you've read your text. If you do my text sets, I always do 2 texts. We do vocabulary, we read our text, we discuss our text, and I use one of the texts to create a student voice piece of writing. In the past, I've always done it on paper. I've walked around and given my students immediate feedback. We do foldables for paper. We take what we wrote, we transfer it onto, this is a quilt. We made a paper quilt based on the Josephina story quilt. This was our rough draft. This is them making their quilt pieces. Well, if I'm face-to-face, even in a socially distanced atmosphere, we still may be able to do this. But if I'm all digital, or even if I have a partial, our students can either be virtual or in person. Well, if you're virtual, you're still going to be on that teacher's class roles. So I am going to be I have to be prepared for that. I can't just say, I don't know what to do. And what if their parents can't pick up paper resources that I'm giving them? Um, so I'm worried about, loss of creativity from my paper-based. So using Word documents, whether it's Google Docs or, Microsoft, have them do their writing. You give them feedback on their individual writing. That's easy to do. Have them copy and paste that. They can still make quilts. Larry mentioned Book Creator. Book Creator is a great way. And then I found this link, and it's again on the resource that I'm sharing with you. There's 15 literacy apps to create books on an iPad, and I bet a lot of those are online as well. I don't have iPads. My students will have some sort of Windows operation, but if it's on an iPad, I'm hoping that they also would be able to get that on their phones if they're using their phones. We know oftentimes our students are very comfortable with using their phones. And in the past, I've always had a rule: you can't get your phone out in class unless you're using it for a purpose that I've given them. So, now they're going to be able to choose to use their phones if they're not finding other things to do. They can easily be distracted when they get on their phones. So I'm gone over my 20 minutes. Again, this is not showing up. I'm not quite sure why. So big thanks to these people from all the Michelle Story and Arena McGrath have a presentation here. So does Carly Spina. These people had some really great presentations. I got a lot of my ideas for them. I wanted to thank them. I want to thank Jonna. And I also just want to thank you for coming to my virtual L presentation. Now I'm going to jump over to YouTube and see what responses you all have given and see if I can't answer some of your questions. And this is far from perfect. So hopefully you all are able to see this and able to participate. I've got a lot to learn with Slido, but I really want to use it. It has great potential. So Jonna, I'm going to unmute you, or if you'll unmute yourself, maybe you can share some of the questions that people have posted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me? Good.
I can hear.
I have basically, we've been all chatting together. Mostly, they're asking about free resources. If everything is free, everything you've given us is free.
Everything I've given you is free. Now Padlet has some paid features that allow you to have more access to Padlets.
Okay.
But everything else has been free. Epic School is free as long as you use it during school hours.
Okay.
So,
yeah, we're just
yeah.
We were just talking about your resources and how we've used some of them and they're just really good. Padlet and Flipgrid. How do you use these resources with newcomers? What would you recommend?
So I've used Padlet with newcomers. We learned about prepositions, and then I used a column-based thing where they had to write sentences under the column of the preposition, and they could use the emojis. Many of them wrote those first on paper and then put it in the Padlet. Flipgrid is great for newcomers, even if they just give me a one-word answer. Microsoft Office, the chat feature, again, you could ask a question and get one-word answers. Anytime you're working with newcomers, again, they're going to have that silent period. So it may be that you get in a room alone with a newcomer, or you set up a Zoom time where that's the only people you're talking is you and that newcomer, and then they might feel more free. But the first 3 weeks of school, I'm going to be setting up my relationships with my students, whether we're face-to-face or live. And so or, you know, in virtual, sorry. So hopefully I can build those relationships where they can feel free to have some of those interactions with me.
Okay.
It's new to
Okay.
me too. So I'm not sure
Right.
if anybody has any suggestions, you know.
Well, in the Slido, folks were just sharing about how they're nervous. They're feeling like they're a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as feeling confident in virtual learning. Is
I
that
think
kind of
we
what
all
you're?
are there. Yeah, that's where I am. But I
Yeah,
thought if I don't rethink how I'm going to do these things, I'm never going to get to feel more comfortable. So I want to continue to teach. And I liked what Larry said. We have to prepare, you know, for a lot of this to go on where we're giving work to them and we've give them enough wait time and that it's not necessarily synchronous. It's asynchronous. I'm sorry, y'all.
yeah, it's a tongue twister.
Um, and I feel I have to say, this is the weirdest presentation I've ever given because I don't hear anybody's voice. And I was afraid to pull up the YouTube because I might end up with an echo. So
Gotcha.
I hope you all have enjoyed this presentation. Um, please ask me any questions. I'm a Twitter junkie and I'll answer you when I can get to you on Twitter. But right now I'm probably going to take a breather and go.
Yeah,
So
compress.
does anybody have any more questions? I want to thank everybody for participating.
There was one question about assessment in distance learning. Do you have any ideas or have you seen anything about
My
assessing?
suggestion for assessment in distant learning is go back and watch Justin Garcia. He had some great things. It's all going to be based on a rubric. And then how you decide to turn that rubric in. And like Larry, I don't grade hard. You know, our ELD classes really, if they're coming and they're participating and they're doing the best that they can do, then usually they're going to do really well in my class. It's just the way it is. I worry less about assessment and more about them taking chances.
Gotcha. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Less about assessment and more about taking chances. Nice.
Um,
Okay.
all right. Thank you very much, Jonna, for helping me with this. And you have no idea how great I feel to be able to share my love of reading and technology with you all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.